Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. This year I've been doing a project on my channel which is called Big Fat Eyeshadow Project, and in that project I go through my palettes and I work on them for a week each, and I'll make 3 exclusive looks with the palette and just get to know them more as a whole. I have really been enjoying that project, and as a result of that project as well, I have been ranking my palettes. So in that project, if you don't know, I have 4 different categories. It is color story, versatility, quality, and personal ranking. So those are my scores, and today I thought I would share with you the palettes that I have ranked so far at the halfway point of the year, from the lowest ranked palette to the highest ranked palette, just so you can get an idea of how they stand today. So I have quite a few palettes next to me to talk about today, so I'm going to jump straight into it. But before I do so, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. So again, we're starting off with the lowest ranked palette, and that one is this palette right here, which is actually one that I just worked on. This is the Aha Honey palette from Colourpop, which is currently ranked at 10 points. So this one scored 10 out of 20. I didn't say before. The max that a palette can score is 20 points, 5 in each category, and again this one came in at 10 points. The main reason why I think this one ranked a little bit lower is because of the color story and versatility, because the color story isn't like the most thought out in my opinion. It's just a bit repetitive, and the versatility again is just very low. I ranked it a 1 I think for versatility and maybe a 2 for color story, I believe, which obviously brought down the overall score quite a lot. So that is the palette that comes in last place. I am at the end of the year going to do a declutter video with all of the palettes, so I think I'm going to do like a cutoff point, maybe like 15, I don't know. We'll see like how it looks at the end of the year, but I'm going to do a cutoff point and I'm going to do a declutter video with all of the bottom ranked palettes. So of course this one here is up for that, and it's going to be either way because it is the lowest ranked palette. But I'll talk you through all of that. Of course, there's going to be reasons why I might want to keep something, even if they score lower. Like this one, for example, is a yellow monochromatic palette, which provides a lot of yellow for me. But again, we'll see how it goes. For now, it's just going to be a general ranking. I'm going to do the clutter, like I said, at the end of the year. Anyway, after that, we're moving up to 11 points, and we have 2 palettes scoring in at 11. The first palette is this one right here, which is my Natasha Denona Love palette. It is the lowest ranked Natasha Denona palette, and it looks like this. And this is a palette that I've always said I just can't wrap my head around the color story. It's super like pretty to me, because I do love those pinks, but it's just like I get thrown off by the purples and the darker shades, I believe. But yeah, it's a nice color story. The quality isn't the best for Natasha Denona, so I think that's also why it's ranking a little bit lower. But yeah, this one comes in at 11 points, not the best, and again, it's probably one that's going to be up for potential decluttering. But yeah, again, we're going to see later on. But for now, this one is again at 11. The other palette that is ranking in at 11 is this one right here, which is the Urban Decay Stoned Vibes palette. This one is a predominantly shimmer heavy palette. It has like the 8 shimmers in the middle and then 4 mattes on the side. And because of that, it again doesn't have too much versatility. Yes, you can mix up the shimmers quite a lot, but when it comes to the mattes, like this is very limited, so you can't really do many looks. It's mainly like a neutral look with a pop of color, or a completely neutral look too. Yeah, I just also don't really have too much like connection to this palette, I guess. Like it's not the highest rank for like personal ranking. And yeah, it's a nice palette, but it's just, I guess, not one that I kind of rate too high in my collection. So again, 11 points for this one right here. Next up, we're jumping up 1 more score to 12, and we have 3 palettes scoring in at 12 points. The first one is another Colourpop palette, and this one is the Sweet Talk palette, which is mostly like a coral monochromatic palette. It does have some other tones in there too, but this is the palette right here. Again, it comes in at 12 points. It is a really nice color story, and I did enjoy this one, but it's just very repetitive when it comes to the shades, because again, it is more that kind of monochromatic undertone. I don't think this is actually counted as a monochromatic palette, but you know, it kind of falls within that realm. Another thing is the quality of the Colourpop palettes. It's just not the highest. So again, obviously that's going to bring down the rating for this one as well. Same with the Aha Honey palette. But again, this one scores in at 12 points. We have a very high-end palette next, and this one is the Pat McGrath Subliminal palette, which is the first Mothership. It looks like this. It is more very like cool toned. It has some blue kind of leaning special shades, Yeah, there's like one kind of white gold shade as well, but it's very blue leaning. And this one has more gray taupe kind of matte, and I do like a cool tone look more now than I used to, but these ones are just very gray undertone, and I prefer like a bit more of a rosier cool tone undertone, and I think again that's why I don't rate this palette the highest. However, the quality of Pat McGrath palettes are always amazing, the special shades are amazing, so I think that one saves it a little bit, but again obviously this one ranks relatively low, and it's the lowest ranked Pat McGrath palette, which is no surprise to me. There's only one Pat McGrath palette that I think I like less, but again, we're going to see how the ranking go, and that is the Divine Rose 2, which I haven't actually used yet. So for now, this is the lowest ranked Pat McGrath palette, and again, coming in at 12 points. The last palette ranking in at 12 is a very small palette, and that's another Natasha Denona palette. This one is the Mini Nude. This is actually one of the very first palettes that I ranked. I think it's actually the first palette, because I wore this one in Sweden at the beginning of the year, because I stayed in Sweden for Christmas and New Year's, and this is one that I was easy to bring with me to start off the project, because it's a small pan and I used this one for the first week of the year. So yeah, it's been a while since I used this one, but I remember that one of the reasons was this one ranked a little bit lower is again the color story and the versatility. The versatility is very high. I believe I gave this one like a 1 for versatility, because all of the looks turn out like, you know, neutral of some sort. There's only 2 mattes, so you know, you can use those 2 in different ways, but it's again not too much variety. And even when it comes to the shimmers, there's not too much change. Like there's 2 mid-tone shimmers and 1 like lighter iconic type of shimmer, so not too much versatility there, and I think that's why this one ranks in a little bit lower. I mean, I'm not surprised because it is only a 5-pan palette, but again 12 points for this one. We have only one palette in at 13 points, and that one is this palette right here, which is the Color Ballet palette from Anastasia. This one is a beautiful color story. It has a cool tone row and a warm tone row at the bottom, and I hadn't really played around with this palette before rolling into this project. Actually, it's a newish palette to me. I got it from my friend, she passed it down to me, but yeah, I do like this palette. I especially like the bottom row because I do like warm tones more than cool tones still, I believe. Like, I'm not as into warm tones anymore, but I do probably still like them a bit more, and I also really love like this shimmer right here, for example. Some of the mattes are really pretty, like I love this like coral shade right there, but again the top row has a lot of more kind of gray undertones, which is my favorite. So yeah, it's falls somewhere in the middle for me. Again 13 points for this palette, which isn't the greatest, but it's an okay palette. So we're moving up to 14 points, and we have 5 palettes coming in at 14 points. The first one is another one that I've recently tested, and that is the Kaleidos Sashimi City palette, which is the Futurism 7. This is a beautiful kind of very simple 6-pan palette. I love this color story because it's like right up my alley. It doesn't go too deep, and it's maybe not like the most versatile palette, but for me this one is a really pretty one. I scored this one quite high when it comes to personal ranking, I remember. But yeah, again, the versatility isn't the highest, and if you want depth and stuff like that, there isn't really much here. The quality is also really nice, so that also brought up the score a little bit, but yeah, this one again falls kind of somewhere in the middle for me when it comes to overall ranking. It's a really nice palette, but it's a smaller one as well, so I think those ones are automatically going to score a little bit lower when it comes to color story and like versatility. Not always, but that's often the case. We have a 9-pan palette next, and this one is another smaller palette, but it's again 9 shades. And this one is the Nude Light Obsessions from Huda Beauty, which looks like this. This is again a beautiful color story. It's actually quite similar to the Sashimi City palette. This one is a little bit more kind of pink undertone though, but they aren't too different. And these again are palettes that I absolutely love. I love this type of shades. They're very simple, kind of everyday shades for me, and I love the kind of soft undertones in these. Like I always say, like something that I can't put my finger on. It's just something about these like warm but not like super warm orangey undertones. Like they can be like rosier, but they're still like warm rosier, if that makes sense. I don't know, it's just something about them that I absolutely love. But yeah, this one again comes in more on the middle, and similar to the Sashimi City palette, this one just doesn't have too much depth to it. The quality is okay too. Like some of the shimmers aren't the best, but it is okay for quality. So yeah, I think that's why it comes in at 14 points. Okay, 3 more palettes in at 14 points. The next one is this one here, which is the Hey Reindeer palette from Odenside. This is a newer palette to me. I got this one end of last year, like November or December time, I believe, and I have really enjoyed reaching for this one. Now we're getting into the palettes that I am starting to enjoy more. This is a beautiful color story when it comes to like, it's just a fun one. I have nothing like it. It's more of a pastel kind of color story, but it's not the typical pastel where it's like a lot of like pastel yellows and pinks and greens and I don't know, like, I mean, there is like, you can see there's some yellow and some pinks and stuff, but it's more like, it has like a different color story. It's like, it has those blues, those more kind of mauve tones, and then some neutrals thrown in. I don't know, it's just a unique color story. The quality isn't the best. It's probably the worst quality when it comes to Odin's Eye. It's not bad, but it's the worst when it comes to Odin's Eye. And yeah, it's just, again, someone that falls in the middle. It's not like an absolute favorite or anything for me, but I did enjoy it when I did reach for this palette. I have similar feelings to the next palette, which is this one right here, which is the At Foresight palette from Raw Beauty Christie in collaboration with Colourpop. This is majority matte. It has two shimmers. Yeah, two shimmers in here. This is actually my product level up palette, so I reached for this one in that project. And yeah, I mean, there is a lot of options for mattes, but there's not too many for shimmers, which means that this palette is quite limited when it comes to the type of looks you can do. Because you only really, if you want to add any shimmers, you only really have those two, and there's no any corner shades or anything either. Another thing with this palette is that it's a lot of mid-tone shades, and there are not like too many lighter shades or super darks. I mean, there is black, I guess, but I don't know, like majority of the shades are mid-toned. So again, I don't know, it's just not a favorite for me because of that reason. It is a really cool undertoned, and the shades in here are very vibrant, even though they are a little bit darker. So I did enjoy this palette, but again, it's not an absolute favorite for me. So the last palette that comes in at 14 points is another Odin's Eye palette, and this is one of my newest palettes. I got this one in January, February time. I got this one actually gifted from one of you guys. One of my subscribers called Carolyn, she sent this one to me, and I'm so grateful. I mentioned this palette in a palettes that got away video, like discontinued palettes that I can no longer get. And I mentioned that I really missed out on this one, and I would love, love to pick it up. And it's one that still lives rent-free in my head. And she says she was decluttering hers, and she was happy to send it to me, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, this one comes in again at 14 points, and it's a really beautiful color story. The quality is really nice. It has two top rows with warm greens, which is something that I absolutely adore. They're quite vibrant as well. And then the bottom rows has more kind of pinks and more kind of a slightly more neutral tones. So there's a lot of aspects that I really love about this palette. I think the reason why it doesn't rank higher is because it is so vibrant. There's not too much options for like pure neutral looks, which is something that I still go for a bit nowadays. Yeah, I've gone into more kind of neutral looks for the everyday. I do still like doing colorful looks like today, and I do wear colorful looks sometimes on the everyday too, but I have been appreciating those more neutral looks, which this one doesn't really have. However, it is really stunning when it comes to, again, those warm greens, which is my favorite type of undertones for greens. And it does have some really beautiful special shades, especially these two right here are super pretty. I really love this green as well, but the shimmers in here are a little bit more of that kind of firmer Odin's Eye formula, which isn't like the most sparkly, but again, they're still really pretty. I mean, when I say not too sparkly, they're like still sparklier than most mainstream shimmer shadows. I used to know what Odin's Eye can do when it comes to shimmer shades, and this one doesn't have the most of those ones. But anyway, this one comes in at 14 points, and this is the last one for that ranking. So moving on to 15 points, we have 4 palettes with that ranking, and the first one is an Natasha Denona palette. This one is the Sendo palette, which is another one that I recently worked on. This one that I had in again for the month of June, which is why it's so recent for me. So this one right here, I do like that you have the warm tone side and the cool tone side, which creates a lot of variety because you can mix and match. You can create like cool tone looks or warm tone looks. Yes, there is like limited kind of amounts you can do with the looks due to like the undertones of both sides, but there is that variety which I really do appreciate. The quality as well is really nice. It doesn't have like those sparkly shades, but it is really good. Natasha Denona has an amazing formula, especially for mattes. So it's a really good palette, and this is actually one that surprises me a lot because this wasn't really one that was on my radar. Yeah, I saw this palette and I was like, I don't need it. Like, for example, with the cold tones, I was like, I have the Sweet Talk palette. I don't really reach for like cool tone greens very much. But I do really like this palette. The kind of warmer side isn't exactly the same as the Sweet Talk palette. And I mean, there is similarities for sure, but this one is a better formula. And then I actually surprised myself a lot, and I do really like these kind of cooler tone greens. It's just something about the undertones of them, and they work really nicely with the warm tone peaches. So really appreciated this palette, and I'm happily surprised by it. So this one comes in at 15 points. Also for 15 points, we have an Natasha Denona palette, which is the mini retro palette, which is the first mini palette that I owned. And you can see this one has a lot of love. This one was in my product level up level 4, which is why it has 4 pans. This is one that I do really love. I love the undertones in this palette. It's a super unique color story. I ranked the color story very, very high, I remember. The quality is also super nice. It has one of my favorite Natasha Denona shimmers, which is the shade Pixie, no, Galaxia. I think this one is Galaxia, this one is Pixie. Galaxia right here is one of my absolute favorite Natasha Denona shades. Even Industrial next to it, yeah, Industrial right here, is also a bit more of a sparkly kind of shade. So I really do love the shimmers in here. And the color story is just very unique. I also, again, love these kind of softer, rosier kind of undertones, like these kind of pinkier tones. So again, it's something that I absolutely love, and this one ranks again relatively high for a small palette, but it's definitely a very well thought out palette, and I think she did a great job with this one. Moving from a very small palette to a very large palette, this is my Love Notes palette from Beauty Bay. This one is again one of those rosier tone palettes. This one has some more cool tones to it. And yeah, it has a lot of different type of undertones. It is one that runs quite light. It doesn't have too much depth to it. You have like 2 slightly deeper shades like this one here, and actually 3, this one here and this one here, but they still don't run very deep. However, for me, that's something that I don't mind, because I do love a soft romantic look, which again, Love Notes, clues in the name, it does give those type of looks, and for me that's something that I really do like. There isn't like the most variety to this one, but you can actually make just like a pure neutral look. You can make like a cool tone purple, a warm tone purple, more kind of a peachy look, mauve look. So you know, there is still variety to it, because there is those different undertones. They're all gonna fall within that kind of romantic realm, but there is more variety to it than you might think. The shimmers in here are absolutely stunning as well. It has like that amazing Beauty Bay sparkly formula, so I do really appreciate that one, and I do really like reaching for those. So yeah, this palette, it's a good one. It's not for everyone, but it's the one that I really do like. So again, it comes in at 15 points. So the last palette for 15 points before we move into like the higher ranked palette is one from Sydney Grace. This is the California Close palette, which is kind of a neutral palette, but this one has again some more unique undertones. It's more kind of a pinkier, coppery kind of undertone, but it does have some like cool tone shades. But even like this one, for example, this one looks like a grey, but it does have that kind of rosy undertone to it, which I do really like, which I talked about earlier. But yeah, it's a really stunning palette. It is quite dark, and the bottom 3 shimmers are quite dark, which is not something that I maybe love, and I think that's one of the reasons why this palette doesn't rank higher than it does. But it does have some great variety to the mattes. It does have like more of a pure cool tone shade, or more of that rosier tone if you want to go for different crease shades. And the same with like, it has 2 more kind of mid-tone to dark kind of mattes, that you can both use for those 2 different type of undertones. And then you have this like almost black shade. It's a very, very deep grayish brown, but it's almost black, which is super, super pigmented. And the quality of this palette, by the way, is super high. It is Sydney Grace, which is an amazing formula. They make amazing eyeshadows, and this one is no exception. So really high quality, good color story. It does maybe run a little bit deeper than I would like, but I do really like this palette still, and I really did enjoy reaching for this one. This one was another product level up palette, and that's why I have 2 pans on it. It was in my product level up level 2. So now we're moving up from 15 to 16 points, and we have 3 palettes for 16 points. First up, we have another Pat McGrath palette, and they all look very anonymous on the outside, but this one is the Bronze Seduction palette, which is another one that I've recently reached for. I really did like this palette. This one has some really, really stunning special shades, some of my favorites. Maybe not my absolute favorites, but some of my favorites. However, this shade right here, the rose gold one, is one of my favorite shades in my collection. I love this palette because you do have some kind of more colorful undertones like this red, and you can't really see, but these ones have like a green undertone. You might be able to see that in the mirror. This one actually goes from a green to a purple. Again, you might be able to see that in the mirror there. So you do have different like colorful undertones, and they can be layered on top of each other for some really unique looks, which is why I like the Pat McGrath palette so much, because even though they're only 10 shades, they do have so much variety to them. This palette runs quite deep though, which, okay, it is a smokier kind of palette. It's called Bronze Seduction. Like, I connect that with like smokier kind of sultry looks, which I do like those type of looks, but for now I don't really want to go for too deep of a look. So the most used matte for me was this one here, which is a pretty shade, and this one doesn't make the looks too deep, so it is a really good option. So yeah, it's a really nice palette. I mean, it's ranking at 16 points, which is quite high. Just for reference, the highest ranking palette that I have is 19 points, which is you know, one shy of the perfect 20. But I don't have too many palettes left to talk about. A majority of the palettes are below 15 points, so ranking at 16 is really good, especially because it takes a lot to hit like a perfect score in every category. You know, the color story might be amazing, but the versatility might not be, or the other way around. Like the color story might just be slightly off, but the versatility is there, and you know, you might be like that, I love the color story, but the formula isn't there, or you know, something like that, anything like that. So it takes a lot to get a perfect score. So 16 is a really high ranking, and so it does show that I like this palette quite a bit. The next palette actually surprised me being ranked so high, but I know this one is a cult favorite, and I always known that, and I did think that I would like this palette maybe more than I originally thought, and that is the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. So this is one that I have always said that I don't love as much as other people, but when I did use this one, I actually loved the looks that I made. I said that this palette has like a lot of variety. Obviously you have like the blue kind of undertones, you have some more brighter tones, you have some more kind of neutral tones, rosier tones, peachy tones. There's a lot of variety to this palette. The formula is also really nice. Personal ranking, maybe not the highest, because again, I've said that I don't like this palette as much as other people, but despite that, every other category ranked really high, which is how it ended up with 16 points, even though my personal ranking might not have been the highest. But it's definitely one that I've switched my kind of mindset of a little bit, and I do appreciate more that now than I did before, just because I have tried it out and I made some exclusive looks with this palette, and I know how well it can perform. So yeah, it's one that comes in at 16 points, and it again surprises me that it comes in at that high, especially when I look at other palettes that are ranked at 16 points as well. Then the final palette that comes in at 16 points is another one that I think surprises some people, maybe other people more than me, but that is the Elva palette from Ollensai. This is my first ever Ollensai. Actually, I got this one and the Red Dragon palette at the same time, but this is one of my first Ollensai palettes, and it's also one of their older formulas. However, I absolutely love this palette. It was so fun to work on. The mattes give a lot of variety. You have some more kind of pure cool tones, some more kind of rosier tones, some slightly light warmer tones. You have the yellow there as well, and this one can create a lot of like sunset looks, which you might not think when you first look at this palette, because I thought this one was more of a more kind of like cool tone palette, which is not, it's not necessarily the case. I also love the shimmers. The shimmers in here are my favorite things. They're super sparkly, super pretty. I made a look just like with, I think I used Lotus and Lilac, maybe like one of the more shades to like deepen it up a little bit, but I used Lilac all over my lid, and it was such an amazing shade. I loved it, and it was so dimensional, so sparkly, and that's the thing with a lot of the shimmers in here. Yes, there are a couple repetitive shades, like this shade here and this shade here are almost identical, and they're also quite similar to this one. This one is a slightly like warmer shade and slightly deeper, but really similar shades, which, you know, isn't the best, but overall I do rate this palette quite high. So again, 16 points for this one. Okay, so we have one palette at 17, we have two palettes at 18 and two palettes at 19, so we have 5 palettes left to go. Let's talk about the 17 ranked palette next, which is this palette right here, and this is a favorite for me. You guys know that these are palettes that I absolutely love. I would say at this point there's no question, there's nothing really I can give criticism on. I absolutely love these palettes. So this one is the Star Wars Mandalorian palette. This one is a favorite of mine. You all know that if you aren't new to my channel. I absolutely love this palette. It does have kind of my, like, I love this undertone of greens, like these ones here, Like this one is a little bit more kind of mint, but these greens right in this corner are just so unique and they suit me perfectly. I love them. I don't think I said this all the time, but I don't think I've ever made a look with this palette that I didn't enjoy. So I love this palette very much. The only thing I think with this one is that the quality has declined a little bit, so that brought down the ranking a tiny bit. I also think I said that the versatility isn't too high, so that brought it down a tiny bit too. But overall, love this palette. 17 points is super high. Yeah, really happy with this one, so that comes in place number 5. Again, like I said, I have 2 palettes ranking in at 18 points. So these are like the place shared 4th and 3rd palette, and we're going to start off with this one right here. This is the Merry Christmas palette from Odin's Eye. I'm actually not going to show you what this one looks like on the inside because this one is my Product Level Up palette, so I don't want to spoil anything. But my next video up, so actually tomorrow, will be my Product Level Up update, so you can check it out there. I'll insert some footage here what this palette looks like so you can see instead of me holding it up. But this is a beautiful color story. It has again kind of some warmer greens on the top row. It does have some cooler greens too, but it does have 2 top rows of greens, similar to the Hella palette, but these undertones are very different. And then the bottom 2 row is more kind of warm tones, more red, kind of orange, gold kind of undertones. I don't know, but it's super pretty. This one has those shimmers that I talked about earlier that the Hella palette lacked. They're super sparkly, super pretty, and even though some of them are a little bit like firmer, they're still very sparkly. The only shade that isn't the most sparkly is the orange shimmer called All Right. Otherwise, this palette has some absolutely stunning shimmers, which is one of the reasons why it ranks so high. Also, the versatility of this palette is very, very good. You do have more neutral shades, more colorful shades, warm tone, cool tones, and again, the formula used is very, very high, which is again one of the reasons why it ranks very high in this whole ranking, 18 points. My personal ranking, I think, as well was quite high for this one. I did enjoy this palette quite a bit, so it only docked 2 points in different categories, so again I ended up at 18 points. The other palette that I have to talk about at 18 points is again one of my favorites. It's been in my collection for longer. So the Odin's Eye palette that you talked about actually also came in at the end of last year, same as the Hey Reindeer palette, so November, December time. So I hadn't really played around with it too much before. Actually, I hadn't played around with it at all before this project, so it was fun to get to know it. But this next palette is a stunning favorite for me. I've had this one for a year and a half now, I believe, in my collection, and that is the Rose Quartz palette from Huda Beauty. This one is just such a beautiful palette. This is what I mean with like cool tones that I love. It has that kind of rosier undertones, which is something that I adore. So I absolutely love the shades in here. These are the type of cool tone shades that I want to go for, but even though it is cool tone, you also have some more warm tone shades. Here you can make more of a, not super warm, but you can make it like a slightly warmer neutral look right there. It does have some more pink shades, some more gray tone shades. It has the most sparkly, amazing shimmers. I mean, maybe not the most sparkly, but for mainstream palettes, this one is up there with one of the most sparkly shades or sparkly formulas. And I love this palette. I love every look that I made with this palette. It's so stunning. It makes me feel all warm and fuzzy on the inside, even though it is like cool tone palette, but it's just my type of undertones, and I have absolutely fallen in love with this palette. And again, it's actually funny because this palette is one that I picked up for my friend as a birthday present. But I didn't realize she already had this palette, so when she had it, I actually got to keep it, which in hindsight I'm so happy with because I absolutely love this one. And again, it comes in at the 2nd highest ranking in place number, like, I guess like 4-3. So that is this palette right here. So again, we only have 2 palettes to go, and these are the very highest ranked palettes. They come in at 19 points, so 1 point shy of that perfect 20 score. And the first palette we have is this one right here, which is a Tiny Marvels palette from Sydney Grace, which is another absolutely stunner. This one looks like this. It is a very versatile palette. I believe I gave it a 5 for versatility because you can do like cool tone looks, you can make warm tone looks, you can make colorful looks, neutral looks, you have depth in it. It's just very, very versatile. Again, formula, I believe I gave it a 5. Actually, did I give it a 4? Maybe that's where I gave it a 4 in the versatility. Because I believe I gave it a 5 for color story too. It's an absolutely amazing color story. It's so well thought out. It has like, I don't know, it's just amazing. It has like the deeper shades, it has the colorful shades, and they all work together too. So maybe, because I know I gave it 5 for personal ranking too, so maybe Versatility is the reason why I gave it a 4, where it deducted 1 point. And I think that might have been, I can't remember, but I think it might have been because even though it has some more colorful shades, they're a little bit more kind of muted colorful, like you can't make too many like super bright colors. So I think maybe that's what it was. But even so, 19 points is amazing, and this is definitely a palette that I cherish so much. It is one that I absolutely love in my collection, and I'm so happy to have it. And yeah, I mean, I knew this one was going to rank very high, so I'm glad that the points reflected that too. Then we have the final palette, which I'm saying final palette, but we need to remember that the Sydney Grace palette ranked the same amount of points, so these two falls both at the very top. But the final palette that we have is the Christmas Eve palette by Odensai, and this one right here surprised me quite a lot. This one is quite a cool toned palette. It looks like this. It has some more grays, some blues, it does have, I mean, some greens and kind of yellow tones on it too, so it's not like a cool toned palette. But when I looked at this one, I thought it was like a gray and blue color story. That's what my mind went to. However, there's so much more to this color story. There's so much variety to it. You can make like a warm tone look with like the yellow and kind of golden shades. You can make like a gray tone look, a blue tone look, a green tone look, purples. So much, it's so much variety in this palette. I remember saying when I used this one that I did the 3 looks. I think I even did 4 looks, but I didn't film one of the looks. And even at that point, I wanted to keep making looks with this, but I was so inspired. I just felt like there were so many other combinations that I wanted to try. And the formula as well, super good. I think I gave it a 5 for formula too. Shimmers are very sparkly, very pretty. Mattes blend really nicely. And yeah, I can't even remember where I gave this one a 4. I think maybe again it would have been for Versatility, because even though you have some options for warmer shades, it is mainly a cool tone palette. I think maybe that's where I docked the points, but it is such a stunning one. And again, this one is one that surprised me quite a bit because I didn't expect to rank this one so high. But I absolutely loved my time with this one. This is an amazing palette, and I have absolutely fallen in love with this one, and I now share this one so much. And it's funny to me because I actually thought I would like the Merry Christmas palette more than the Christmas Eve palette, because I do love those greens. I love those kind of, yeah, warm greens, warm undertones, more than I do blues and grays. But this one comes in higher, and you know, I think the formula in here might be, no, I think they're about the same for formula. And I don't know, I just had so much fun with this one, and it made some really stunning look that was out of my comfort zone, but also very flattering, and something that I really did enjoy. So very good palette, and I'm so happy that I got this one. And I got this one, and again, all of these Christmas themed palettes from Odensai I got end of last year when they finally restocked these, because they released these as limited edition, this one and the Merry Christmas palette, and they brought them back, and I decided to pick them up. And again, I'm so happy I did, because I do actually do love both palettes, this one especially, but it was such a good decision to pick those up, even though maybe I didn't need 4 new palettes. But so far I enjoyed all of them. The Hey Reindeer palette comes in at the lowest so far, and I still have to trust the Snow Dream palette, but the 2 older Christmas releases are amazing, and amazing formulas and amazing palettes, so I'm really happy that I picked those up. So that, you guys, is going to be it for this ranking. Yeah, it's quite fun to look at how I'm ranking palettes, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the year goes with the second half of the palette. I believe I have about exactly half of my palettes left to go. In this project, by the way, I'm only doing 5-pan palettes and up, so I think I have 3 quartz in my collection. Those are not going to be included. I'm also not going to include the Cleona Deep Sea Treasures palette because it's an all shimmers palette, so can't really do too many looks with that. I'm actually wearing one of the shades from that palette today on my eyes, by the way. But these palettes need to have shimmers and mattes and be more than 4 shades. That's what qualifies them to this project. But I'm looking forward to ranking again the rest of my palettes later this year. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video here. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you're ranking your palettes for any capacity this year, which palette is ranking in the highest for you? I would love to know, because everyone has different preferences. But again, I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are, and I will catch you in my next video, which again will be up tomorrow. Bye guys!